So I have with me two pivotal members of the production for The Reconciler, a faith-based thriller that was covered on Clip Breakdown. Shawn Justice and Scott Galbraith. Hello, Shawn. Hello, Scott. Shawn, can you tell us how you were involved with the film?
I was the co-producer and director and co-writer. Scott and I have been friends for a while, and when I ended up being in a position to make another film, just go out and have some fun, kind of was what the initial. I hadn't made a film in a few years, so I knew of Scott's play that he had done called The Reconciler, and I said, what if we just went out and made a film based on it? So that's my involvement.
Excellent. And that brings us to Scott. Hi, Scott. Can you let us know about your involvement with the production and its inception?
I wrote the play that the film is based on, and I did it for my church. I played the role of Ed in the play as well. And then thankfully, Shawn let me reprise my role in the movie. I was the only member of the play cast. We even changed some of the characters from my original play. Like the twins in my original play were a mother and a daughter, not twins.
I see.
So I wrote the original play. I wrote the first draft of the screenplay, and then Shawn, of course, wrote the final draft, and then, of course, I played Ed in the movie. So that was my involvement in it.
Many people might not be aware that this script was based on a play. Can you let us know a little bit about that original run and where it was held and what the response was?
Well, one thing we got to address is the elephant in the room.
Sure.
I understand that people who, first of all, Shawn and I are flattered that our film is getting attention after all these years, because the original distribution deal that we got was
right.
was what was really god awful. The original distribution deal was the real thing that was god awful. So anyway, but the one thing that everybody seems to be doing is calling this the Christian version of Saw. Now, while I understand the comparison because a lot of things are formulaic these days, I actually didn't get the idea. I hadn't even seen the movie Saw when I got the idea. The idea actually came from, you're going to find this very funny, the sitcom Perfect Strangers. There was an episode where Larry was mad at Balky, and so he handcuffed him to him until he talked to him and they made up, and then the key broke and they ended up chained together for the rest of the episode. And then there was another episode years later where their girlfriends were fighting, and they orchestrated this plan to lock the door of the apartment and throw the keys out the window and said, nobody's getting out of here till we talk. And I said, it would make a great movie or maybe a series if there was a guy who did that. And so I started writing the beginning of it, and then I'm telling it to a friend, and they're like, Scott, this sounds an awful lot like Saw. So I went and saw Saw. I was convinced that I was never going to do this for anything except a play for my church. And so I literally said to myself, okay, there might be some similarities, but most of the people that are going to see this are members of my conservative congregation. They're not into horror movies, so I'll be completely safe. I never at that point in a million years thought it would ever be a movie.
Isn't life funny that way?
But like I said before, I'm amazed that no one's ever compared Saw to the movie Cube, if you've ever seen that. The one reviewer of this movie who called me out on writing a review of my own film, which I did. All independent filmmakers have done that at some point, I'm sure. The guy who directed the first film I was in, the very first thing I put in the review was gripping from minute one, because that was my philosophy towards what I wanted it to be. I wanted people to be gripped from minute one, because that is a phrase not really used to describe a lot of faith-based films. Most faith-based films, you have to wait a half hour at least before they get good.
Sure.
To quickly answer your original question, we did the play twice at my church, South William Church of the Nazarene, for the public, and it was only like a 40-minute long play, because most Easter musicals at our church are that long, because that's the attention span my church has. So.
Well, that brings up two very, I think, fascinating topics that touch on what I love most about filmmaking. You said a few things there. For example, working with what you have and the changes that happen during adaptation, either because they're easier to put on film than they are on stage, where things are a little more of a suspension of disbelief. And also this idea that rather than it being inspired by Saw, it was more, it sounds like, inspired by bottle episodes of sitcoms, where for whatever reason, we're all stuck in this location and we have got to work something out. And I think that that's really evident in all of the plot lines that take place with you and the twins in the film. On that, I would be fascinated to hear more about the process. And maybe, Shawn, this is where your co-writing came in when the opportunity was provided to make this into a full-length feature film. What was the kind of thought process about how you would build out the story and which characters were added? And what was that kind of revision process like for you both?
I had, I'm not sure how much to overshare or share, but my wife and I had a son who passed away and to a drowning. And there was a settlement that came out of that. But we wanted to do projects that kind of honored him. And instead of have, some mega big budget, thing because I still felt rusty. Most of my work had been in corporate film and video. And that's where you make the money, really, the commercials and that type of thing. I had made one film before and it had been about 14 years. So I was like, I'd love to get out there and do something. I had bought a red camera, actually from a government contract that I had. And so I was using it for my corporate work, but I had always wanted to use it for narrative. And I said, why don't we just get out, shoot something that would take only a few days to shoot, not spend, tons of money or anything. And I can't remember how it came up about the Reconciler, but I think Scott had sent me a tape or something of the play. And I was like, that's kind of intriguing. Scott by trade is a performer, musician.
Magician. Everybody does that. Don't worry.
Magician. And so I really like the way Scott could weave in mystery elements and, being a magician. Most of the stories that he writes have those elements. And I'm more of a character person and it would take him 5 minutes. So it would take me an hour to try and figure out how to set up the magician kind of thing. So when I saw the play, I'm like, we could probably shoot this in very limited amount of time. In fact, we shot the whole film on 11 days.
Wow.
Was it 11? Yeah, I think 11 days.
And I was only on the set for six of them.
Yeah, and we shot the whole basement scene where the twins and Scott were in 3 days.
Wow.
And it was 12 pages a day. And you always, as a filmmaker, of course, break down how many pages a day you're shooting. Scott suggested that we use the twins instead. So I helped rewrite and what I call writing for the screen, because from a play script to a screenplay, you're thinking a lot more visually. And I knew different locations and I'm thinking through, I love the Columbia River Gorge where I live in the Vancouver area of Portland. So it's like, why don't we try and shoot up there? And so I had a co-producer who checked out the locations and it all started coming together. I wrote the first draft.
The story was only the guys in the room and the 2 flashbacks. Laurie the reporter was not in my original play.
No. And that's what happened is I ended up with 62 pages based on his play. And I was like, oh boy, we need to be at least 75 pages, if not more. For feature length, the Academy feature length is 75 minutes and more.
I have plenty more I can say about that. What else is new? But first, let's take a quick relaxation break with the sponsor of today's video, 2 Dots, which is an amazing puzzle game that I've been playing on my phone lately, along with millions of other people, and I can see why. I don't really take any mobile game brand deals because I have to get on there and play the game and be like, oh yeah, this is something I like. And 2 Dots is so much fun, but in a way that appeals to my very minimalist design aesthetic. 2 Dots allows you to travel through these really pretty illustrated worlds while gathering gorgeous collectibles. It's this interesting thing where I'm still using my brain, but also I'm taking my mind off of things. It's just what I need. And most importantly, it's accessible, free to download for iOS or Android. I feel like graphic designers will appreciate this one. Anyone who just needs to take a break during their day. For example, like I'm always transferring these huge 4K video files. I'll just get on 2 Dots and it's a great way to pass that time while also give my brain a chance to relax. I love the music, I love the vibes, but I also love the haptic feelings. Every time you connect the dot, it vibrates in my hand. And the levels are just challenging enough that I truly feel like a sense of achievement. Plus 2 Dots switches it up. For example, you can do a weekly scavenger hunt this month. You can play an Easter themed treasure hunt, 7 special levels that you can complete to unlock a very unique reward. And it's not super heavy. I'm not fighting demons. There aren't these crazy sound effects that scare my dogs. It's actually really pretty relaxation music. Anyway, let me put this down. Please use the link in my description if you want to download 2 Dots or scan the QR code that's on the screen right now and get started with the most suited to my brain type of mobile game I've yet to encounter. Thank you, 2 Dots. I love you.
And so I had been introduced to Sherry Morris. I was friends with Roddy Piper. He lived in the area here, and I'd worked on a couple of other reality projects with him. I was his cameraman on a pilot for, believe it or not, a wrestling show.
Right.
So.
With Roddy Piper being most well known for his work as a wrestler, is it accurate that this was Roddy's last film role?
It was the last film that he shot. We came out before another film they had used him on. In fact, there are elements within the movie where I had planned on doing ADR because our audio guy we had hired was a newer audio guy, low budget.
Sure.
And he had placed the microphone very poorly on Roddy. And so we got these muffled, and I'm like, okay, well, we're going to have to do ADR on that. But then he passed away before I was able to actually do it, unfortunately. So we scrubbed the audio as best we could. Anyway, It's just low budget filmmaking, and
I'm also pretty sure that nothing Roddy said was actually in the script.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story. Yeah, Roddy did what Roddy wanted to do.
Well, I'm sure that led to a lot of great moments on set, or
it did.
Kind of that magic that comes from being able to work outside the script.
Yeah.
I think many actors are known for this. And what you're saying is something that I think is so unique to the medium of filmmaking or visual production, I guess, is it's such a long process, and it doesn't always, especially when there are budget constraints or casting things, anything that prevent certain things from getting accomplished. I think with a film having so many points and so many moving parts, there will just always be a certain number of compromises and changes to the plan that have to happen. That's always what drew me to filmmaking, is the near constant problem solving, and how do you still tell the story? So were there any compromises that had to be made due to the budget that weren't necessarily what you were planning to shoot, but you were still happy with the result, or that you think was a really successful aspect?
Well, a perfect example of what you're talking about would be the reason why there were twins in the movie, but not twins in the stage play. One little trick you learn when you do church drama, because most people who are in church drama are not professional actors, is if you give them a piece of realism to work on. So Laurel and Sally Henschel, who really are mother and daughter, played the mother and daughter in my stage play. And the two guys who played the soldier and his son were also really father and son. Now, the son was a little bit younger in the stage play. Now, the reason why that change was made was because Jeremy and Jordan Steele, who played James, not Smitty, and Alex in the film, were actually attached to another project that Shawn and I had been trying to make before Reconciler and are still trying to make to this day. Unfortunately, the characters were supposed to be 18 years old, and Jeremy and Jordan at the time were on the verge of aging out the parts. And they used to live here in Massachusetts, and I had done 2 plays with them. They had helped me on a couple birthday parties, and I knew that I had good chemistry with them and could work well with them, and we'd always wanted to do a movie together. So I said, Shawn, what makes more sense? Doing a casting call that maybe we can't afford, that's going to take time that we don't have, to find a mother and a daughter that I might be able to work well with, or rewriting the script and making it twin brothers when we know Jeremy and Jordan and I can work as quickly as you need us to.
Right.
Now, sometimes one change spills over into another. In my original play, the cops were both men. Since we changed 2 female leads to guys, Shawn was like, I think that we should change one of the cops to a woman here to actually that improved that storyline, because it would take me too long to explain, but it was a different reason for the disagreement in my original script. But Shawn came up with the idea of doing it as the department's being sexist type of thing, which I thought worked so much better. And to be honest with you, Shawn, I wish I had thought of that.
Yeah,
so kudos to you on that. So.
Yeah, I have to say, Shawn, maybe you can speak to other examples that you noticed, but those particular examples, like the implied sort of sexism within the police force, I thought that was a very intriguing kind of dynamic there. And it felt very well baked into the script. So I can see how that was a very successful point of adaptation. Was it helpful for you as a director to work with people Scott referred to you and had already established a working relationship with each other?
I did all the casting here in the Portland area. And so I knew a lot of these people. I had another guy out of Canada suggest...
Frank Chiseram.
Yeah, Frank. He played the other, and he's a very good actor. And he's very experienced. And he was just a referral, and we brought him out of Canada, Toronto. Sherry came out of Alaska, and these were just referrals from this other friend of mine who is a producer. And he's like, "Hey, I'm trying to use these people more." And we're actually talking to his company about doing distribution. So he was hoping to get his actors that he, knew, and he was using on other projects so that there'd be the familiarity. And I liked everyone. I rewrote most of the people who were trapped together, rewrote a lot of the dialogue, with the male female kind of thing. And the fun thing about, it wasn't like we didn't put together people who had like murdered, like a murderer and a victim or something like, or not a, well, like a parent or whatever.
Sure.
We didn't want to get that severe. But we wanted to do things that people might see as trivial, but yet they cause these, great, people not talking to each other for years. And it was like, I think you and I were talking about this before we started, Nick, what do we have in common? What can we, come together on and go, oh my gosh, I misunderstood you. I misunderstood you. And because of that, we haven't been talking. And so this is meant to be, I think, a real, kind of a introspective kind of film where, and we've had people come to us. They're like, after watching this, I called my son, and we had a great talk. And, and for us, that's, that's really the kind of reward that we love to see out of our film. People say, well, it's a Christian film or it's a message film. It's like, our goal is to get people to have discussions and the talk to go beyond, make it entertaining, but also, maybe some kind of a tool that helps people improve on their lives and who they are too. So it was fun. It was fun to try and come up with these ideas. And when I was short on the script, I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So within a day or two, very shortly before we started shooting, came up with the whole Lori storyline. And I think that's why maybe it could have been better if I had more time to write. But that's, again, one of those compromises like you're talking about, that you're like, if we had more time. The mountain scene where the army dad and his son, we had 2 days of shooting there, and we had planned out the whole shooting day, and we got fogged in on that first day. And so it greatly limited our shooting time. And that's just one of those things, and the kind of compromises of the things you can't control, that you're like, oh, shoot, because you're in low budget filmmaking, you're constantly compromising. And, the old joke is you just don't come up with plan A or B. You you have plans all the way through AA kind of thing,
Right.
And the other phrase that I always recall, someone told me years ago, they said, it's a miracle that a film actually ever gets made, especially knowing all the compromise and the issues that you go through.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very hard for people to understand what it's like being on set, the taxing kind of nature, especially on a low budget set where many people are wearing a lot of different hats. And I can imagine those 2 outdoor days were tiring. I'm sure it must have been quite a challenge. And to your point, when I think about the finished product, I'm not left thinking about it as a faith-based film, which in a way, I think having it been introduced to me as such, as a faith-based Saw, even though that wasn't the intention, I think that was very intriguing to many people in it.
I'll take it.
Saw it, no bores.
Yeah, exactly. I loved that nature of it. As you mentioned, the sort of lack of there being necessarily life or death stakes in the crimes or the reasons for these estranged family and friends or coworkers. And I can see how it would inspire people to realize, opening the lines of communication is going to do so much in getting us back towards where we want to be. And to, as you had said, and thank you for sharing where the budget originally came from for the film, and what a great way to honor your son as you had chosen.
Caleb's credit as the executive producer for the film.
Yeah.
That's really special. And I think it's the strongest, part that I took away from the film is like, and I've always felt this in a somewhere in the background. I'm lucky to be very close with my family, and there are always fights, but I never I know we'll always be able to work it out because what else are we going to do? This is, we're family for life. But it's so easy, especially when, there's disagreements about religion or politics, which are very divisive. It's easy to write people off, even though at the core of it, you care so deeply about one another. I was fascinated to hear that the storyline with Lori, who I incorrectly was calling Sienna throughout my review. Apologies.
She looks more like a Sienna, right?
Yeah, I think Sienna is the name Michelle Blanchard's character.
Yes, right.
So I had just been looking at the wrong part of IMDb, but I'd seen Sherry Morris as the star of Unwanted Presence, which was another faith-based horror film that I had reviewed. So it was very exciting.
She also has a big role in Out of the Darkness, my other movie.
Oh, excellent. I'll have to check that one out.
You should also check out A Murder of Innocence. You'll see a couple of Reconciler actors resurface in that, including me. It was a film that Shawn was hired to write. It's based on a true story about 2 years after. I play a deputy sheriff, and the sheriff is played by Xander Steele, who played the army dad.
Yes, I was a big fan of Xander's character in the film. So I'll definitely check those ones out, and I'll make sure to put that information in the description so that others can find out where to stream them as well.
There's another suspense film, Out of the Darkness, by the way, and I called it kind of a Jonah film, where the guy gets trapped in the forest, and that's where he gets pulled, between light and darkness. And you have some horror elements, I guess, maybe. I don't know. Suspense, anyway. But it was fun.
Right.
Anyway.
A lot of the faith-based films that I end up reviewing on my channel are very, you wouldn't call them suspense by any means. It might be, more heartfelt or a romantic comedy type of feel. But with religions of all types, there are so many stories and allegories that are just really heavy with like these human emotions and experiences that are sort of universal. I think it's interesting to put that on screen in these modern contexts because it helps us kind of see why certain religions or spiritualities or philosophies draw people in. It's because of the things that we all have in common, the parallels rather than the differences and the details. But so what have you felt has been the response from the public? Scott, you got in touch with me first, letting me know there were certain things that maybe my perception was accurate about the budgetary constraints affecting the final product. Other times, not so much, and that's totally fair. Generally, what was it like reading responses to this?
Anytime there's a review of the film, I mean, this is my first screenwriting credit, so it's kind of hard not to stay away from it. I mean, it was a little heartbreaking. Many years ago, back after Roddy Piper had died, we got our first video review, and that person just tore the film apart. And so that was kind of the first one. And I don't know. I guess we recently got the film redistributed on Christian Movies YouTube page, and I guess that's one of the reasons why a lot of people have been seeing it. This one guy, Curtis something, who has like 1 million followers, he did a comparison video, and then all of a sudden I noticed they were popping up a lot all over the place. And I think for the most part, the reception has been good. I mean, I won't lie, when someone says the movie's god awful, I'm like, okay, we tried our best. You know what I mean? With what we had. And some of the stuff that people find like either annoying or subpar about the film, I kind of like hear that and I go, join the club. You know what I mean? We could have done it better, but you know what I mean? We had this kind of restriction and stuff. And so, I just put out a little plea to you and other people on Facebook who had done those, for lack of a better term, reviews / making fun of our movie, and saying like, well, if you would like an answer to some of those questions, I will gladly give them to you. And actually, maybe, Nick, this is something I've been wanting to tell you. There were 2 things in your review that you absolutely called in the film that I wanted to let you know about real quickly.
Thanks.
Jeremy and Jordan's character are disagreeing about what's right as far as worship. You said, I think, something like, my guess is that means that he was going to a church that plays guitars and he was going to an old-fashioned one. You're not far off. Baptists and Nazarenes are both versions of conservative born-again Christians, okay? But Nazarenes believe in something called the doctrine of holiness, and Baptists believe in something called eternal security. Basically, it's a debate as to whether or not you can lose your salvation or Christianity after you have accepted Christ. Baptists believe once saved, always saved. Nazarenes believe if you make a decision later on to walk away from God, you're no longer a Christian. And there are Baptist and Nazarene churches in this area that will have nothing to do with each other because of that one difference. And I find this ludicrous. I find this absolutely ludicrous that they're arguing over something. If you have no intention of actually rejecting Jesus, why are we debating whether or not you can? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So rather than do a disagreement about I'm a Christian and you're not, I wanted to basically do a version of that to show some church people, okay, you're being this stupid. So that's kind of where that argument came from. But I didn't want to call the denominations by name.
I think that's really interesting because I was watching the film and I thought, oh, okay, so he didn't turn his back on the religion. He wanted to practice it in a different way, which at first it's like, oh, my thought was like, is that even a big enough conflict? But as we've kind of discussed, like very small details can cause very large rifts. Obviously, it created entirely different denominations of the religion. And in that case, really appreciate how the nuances you just described are almost reflected with the son who kind of left the family and then came back, reflects that detail of if you turn your back on Jesus, are you still loved, or does he still love you? And it's like the same kind of thing came through in their story.
A lot of what I was kind of, when I reworked the script, and a lot of this stuff was from Scott, is, as a follower of Christ, as a Christian, for us, it's a lot about relationship and through how we relate to God through prayer, through whatever. And there are certain elements, as Scott's talking, where it's like, no, this is proof. You're going to church, you're doing this. And it's like, well, wait a minute. That's do's and don'ts. And what I was trying to explain with the one character is like, yeah, okay, it's about the relationship that I have with God, and going to church is enjoyable to within that relationship. But if I make it all about do's and don'ts, do you really have a relationship with God or not? Are you just trying to fill the boxes? It was not that I was saying one had it and one didn't, but it was how people, and it's really interesting because I went to a performing arts school that was in the middle of the Black community, and that's how they voluntarily integrated white and Black people back in the 70s, where the performing arts school there. It was very intriguing because my twin brother and I, we were very active in the Bible studies and fellowshipping with other Christians. We were very strong in our faith at the time, but it was very interesting because we talked to people that went to much more charismatic churches, or we came up in this, and we kind of found those, things. It's like, oh man, how does that play out? And so, yeah, I mean, it was just those types of things that I love to explore in my movie. It's not forced, right? It's not a forced religious message. It's like, no, we're just exploring these people's faiths and how do they conflict? And those are the kind of stories I love doing and getting into.
I appreciate you talking about the do's and don'ts that people sometimes associate with the religion, because from what I hear from people who respond to my reviews of faith-based content, a lot of their feelings of alienation from any sort of organized religion come from a personal experience where they were feeling prescribed a set of rules that they could not adhere to. And then maybe their family system or the community that they were in was more focused on checking off those boxes, as you said, than having a relationship with a God of their choosing. So I think it's really great to put those stories on camera, because it might open people's mind back up to realize, like, oh, it's not God who I
don't misunderstand a bad experience with a church with a bad experience with God himself.
Exactly.
I wish people would stop blaming Jesus Christ for something Emperor Constantine did. There was a Roman emperor 300 years after Christ was on earth who politicized Christianity. He became a Christian and he made it the law. And if you were a Christian, you got high social standing. And I'm sure there were a lot of people claiming to be Christians who were just doing it because it meant that they were in good graces with the emperor and stuff. But that's where all of the politicizing of Christianity started. If Jesus had wanted to politicize Christianity, he would have aligned himself with Rome when he was on this earth. And all the Christian politics we have today, we have to thank for that, because that's where it started.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, for myself personally, I can say I had a period in my life where I just was like, it's atheism. I have to go with atheism. It's the only thing that makes sense. Until I got to another point in my life where I realized I was looking for a higher power to believe in and a sense of purpose in the universe beyond what I could see. It took a lot to realize, like, oh, okay, so I had this negative experience with the way politics are and the separation of church and state maybe not always being at the top of mind when we hear certain political debates. It's easy to associate and be like, well, then I guess, that's not my God or whatever. But
throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they used to say.
Exactly.
One other really quick thing, Nick. Remember I was saying that there were two things that you spotted in the movie? I wanted to tell you what the other thing was.
Yes.
And this actually kind of surprised me. My big contribution to the Laurie storyline, kind of my only contribution, was after Shawn wrote the Laurie storyline, we had a script that was long enough, but we had one little problem. We had two separate stories that had nothing to do with each other. So we were racking our brains trying to figure out how to tell the audience these two stories are occurring in the same universe. And at 1:30 in the morning one night, I called up Shawn and I said, you know that scene you wrote with Laurie coming home by herself, having dinner, reading the Bible? What if she comes home and we reveal that she is the mother/wife of the soldier and his son? And it was like Shawn's eyes lit up on the other end of the phone and said, Scott, I think you just solved three of the movie's problems, because I thought that we needed to explain more about why Laurie was the way she was. He wanted one more scene with Jeff and JR after the scene on the mountain, and we would connect the two storylines at the same time. The funny thing is, in your review, you saw that and you said, I didn't realize that. We didn't mean it as some kind of big revelation. We meant it as a explanation scene.
I see.
The fact that you surprised me and said, I didn't realize that she was even connected. I didn't think that audiences would accept the movie with two unconnecting storylines. So that was why I said to Shawn, we have to connect the stories.
Yeah, and I knew I wanted to connect them somehow, but I could not figure it out for the life of me. I was like, man, how do we? And Scott came up with it. I'm like, yeah, I love it. And I think as an audience, you're rewarded, right? By the end of going, oh, I get it, and hey, maybe you might watch it again thinking, okay, now I know these things. And those are the best kinds of movies where you figure something out or you see something and then you go back because you want to watch it again because you're like, okay, this makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did think that was a very effective reveal. And on a subconscious level as a viewer, with Laurie's storyline, always being like, okay, where is this going? How is she she connect to the reconciler? I appreciated that she was a journalist and it wasn't, not to compare it to Saw one more time, but that being, following the detective as they try to crack the case, that was a separate thing. Shawn, since then, as you said, to build in that rewatchability where you go back and have a different perspective, knowing their relationship. One thing I love to do on the channel is kind of brainstorm different ways, basically just what I would suggest if I were in the writer's room. I'm curious if, since the movie's been released, have you had any thoughts on how you might have interwoven Laurie in a different way or given foreshadowing or clues? I think in my video, for example, I was like, oh, what if her son and her husband are missing at one point during this whole thing, or she gets the bad news, or where do you feel like you could have gone to kind of, to kind of marry those two stories together? Would you have done it at an earlier point in the film if you were rewriting and reshooting?
And that's a great question. Great question. I mean, it would have been interesting to perhaps not necessarily fully reveal it, but maybe provide some Easter eggs, where maybe she's at home or, maybe we see this or that makes you go, wait a minute, don't we know those guys? And that picture on the mantle there, one of my old co-producing, actually he was co-producer on Reconciler. He was like, Shawn, you have to treat the audience like they're third graders. And I'm like, no, I don't believe you have to do that. There are some elements where you do, but maybe it's just the intelligence level that I want people to, it's like, if some people get it, they get it, and great, that's their reward. But I'm not going to dumb down every scene and everything. I tell subtle jokes and some people get them, some people in daily life. And I like to do that in my films, just to not treat the audience like they're idiots.
I think that's really wise. I think I agree with your philosophy there, which is reward active viewers. I certainly always try to watch actively. I suppose on some level, it needs to still serve as entertainment to those who are watching more passively. For the reviews, I end up watching the films about 3 times. And so on my second viewing, I was excited. I was like in Lori's office, I was looking at everything on every bulletin board, trying to see if she had written a past story about her missing family getting rescued or whatever the case may be. So I think that
Shawn was saying that his co-producer said, treat the audience like they're 3 or whatever. I had made a similar suggestion that he didn't take. I'm actually kind of glad that he didn't. You would be surprised how many people in church audiences did not get that the 2 stories my character is telling the twins were supposed to be like a year or 2 years ago. You know what I mean? They were supposed to be like in the past. Like, for example, I had one person come up, one of the people who wrote a review of the thing, said to me, I don't understand how the woman detective goes from being in the car to being by a bridge to being back in the car again. And I'm like, that's because the scene at the bridge is present day. The scenes in the car are a flashback.
I think that's another interesting opportunity that when there's proper planning time and enough budget to really nail the look, to in a subtle way, illustrate the timeline, maybe through different camera work. One thought I had was
maybe he has a beard.
Sure, exactly. Or different color temperature. These are all things that I think larger budget or films but even then you can't be sure that it's going to read for the audience. They have the luxury of test audiences as well.
You learn in the process, and you as a filmmaker, even though you've been to school for it, doing an actual film is completely different, and you learn so much. And I guess my attitude has been about finished projects is you're not going to go back and change them. So I'm not saying you wash your hands of them, but you're like, hey, it is what it is. Filmmakers can learn from that kind of attitude of saying, you know what, it was the best film I could make at the time. And if you honestly believe that, then great. And I think that was it for us, for the budget, for the time constraints. We made the best film that we could. There's certain ways, knowing what I know now, having made other films, where it's like, oh, I could have done this, could have done that. And that's a good retrospective to have, but you don't have to beat yourself up for it.
Right.
You live and you learn, and being a filmmaker is just a constant trajectory of growth, right? Hopefully.
Yeah.
That you've never really arrived at being the best filmmaker that you could ever be, because you just keep learning. And I'm in my early 50s, and I'm still feel I have a lot to learn.
Yeah, I think it's something that's really important for people who work in all types of art to eventually come to understand. I know my personal journey throughout film school and working on projects. It was first very hard to accept feedback or criticism, because it's like, I can't go back and change it. So I want to explain and justify and get, and dig my heels in. But now, especially with the type of work that I do, it's like, by the time I hear something that I got wrong, I've made 2 other videos that I've watched 1,000 movies. In the comments, people were telling me I was calling Lori Sienna, and then you think, oh, okay, yeah. And it makes me consider it from more aspects the next time I approach that subject matter. As you said, the movie is very effective. It's been fascinating to hear how it was adapted and its origin. And I'm sure that it reached young people who were inspired and are now making their own films, and they want to tell stories too. That's where I always got my inspiration as a young person, was those lower budget video on demand films that I was like, it seems like something I could do in my backyard. Granted, there's so much more that goes into it. And it's something I think I really admire in your film. So thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time to discuss it with me today, for being such good sports about the review being, also a comedy show.
I picked up on that very quickly, yes.
Well, I'm always very grateful. I would love to wrap up just hearing a little bit about anything you might be working on now, and where people can expect to see more from you. Can we start with you, Scott?
As far as things that I'm working on, as Shawn mentioned, I'm a professional magician, and one of the things, I run a little cosplay group called the Mario Players. If you want to check us out on Facebook, we do events and stuff. We're actually going to the premiere of the Mario Brothers movie on Wednesday. We'll be live streaming our review of that right afterwards. The one thing we want everybody to know about is Lucifer and the Father. Shawn was talking about Bob Shepard, who played Detective Tilton. He plays God and I play the devil. And it's basically just, what if one day God said to Lucifer, hey, what do you say I buy you a cup of coffee and we talk? So you can watch Lucifer and the Father on YouTube, just like you can Reconciler or the other film I was involved with that Shawn did, A Murder of Innocence. I would encourage people to check those out.
Yeah, I have my production company site called justicepictures.com. And there's at the top, I think left, there's a tab for films, and you can actually go there and see all the films that I've worked on or done. I've sold screenplays too. I sold one called Justice. I couldn't come up with a better name, but it was a Western.
It's a perfect name.
That's right. And it was on Netflix for few years. Stephen Lang plays the corrupt mayor in it. Of course, the Avatar fame. A couple of other great actors who have been in The Sopranos and stuff were on Justice. I think on the top right of my site, you have the things called In Development. Lucifer and the Father of the series is on there. They kind of spar back and forth on some things that are real kind of deep, spiritual. Why this? Why that? Do that. And I shot that in Central Oregon and some beautiful scenery out there. So
your career is very fascinating, and your line of work, Scott, as well, and everything that inspires your writing and your work as a musician. I said it.
Say sleight of hand artist.
Your work as a magician. Sleight of hand artist. I like that. Thank you both so much for the work you put into the film and for all of the work you do.
Well, thank you, Nick. Yes, thanks for having us.
Thanks, Nick. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. Or
yeah. Let's
call it your show.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also, thanks again to Two Dots for sponsoring today's video. Make sure you use the QR code or the link in my description to download this super enticing mobile game today.